My name is David Henderson. I'm the technology coordinator for Southwest Arkansas Education Cooperative, and we're just going to do a skim the surface overview. Well, okay, it's a little deeper than that, but but basically a skim the surface overview of Zoom and some of the different settings, some of the different things you can do in Zoom. I'm going to share my screen with you at different places so that you can see what's going on. But I'm not sure if Zoom is going to let me show the Zoom screen. It generally doesn't like to do that. So there may be some things that I talk about that you won't necessarily see on your screen. And because you are participants, there are some things that when you're hosting your own Zoom that you will see that you won't see as participants, or perhaps what you see is a little different, but when you're hosting your own, then you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, so the first thing we're going to start with are some of the real basics of Zoom, and I'm just going to go across the icons that are across the bottom if you're on a PC, a Mac, or a Chromebook. If you're using the app, then some of these things may be in a different place. But starting in the lower left, you have the microphone. And right now, yours should have a line through it indicating that you are muted. And even if you unmuted your mic a moment ago, as the host, I can actually go into the participant list and I can mute everybody's microphone. So you can do that too as you're working with your students and they all come in yelling and screaming and having a great time because this is the first time they've seen each other in a while. Then you can actually go to the participant list and hit mute all, and then that way that'll quiet everybody's mic down. And along those same lines, one of the things you want to think about is establishing, just like you have, rules for when you're in the library, you're going to have rules for when you're in your Zoom. So you want to think about those kinds of things, or if the students are allowed to chat, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But if the students are allowed to chat, then can they, come on. Sorry, I'm trying to admit somebody and it will not let me. There we go. But is that how you want the students to be able to communicate out that they have a question, those types of things? So in the lower left, you have mute. If you touch or click on that icon, then it will, the slash will go away, and you're welcome to do that. We're playing around. And as you are speaking, you should notice that the microphone fills up and down with a little green fill box. Letting you know that it is picking you up as you're talking. Okay. So there you go. Somebody unmuted. I don't know who, but there you go. All right. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, like, I can hear me talking. So you want to watch that too in terms of your volume with your speakers and how close your microphone is to your speakers, because if they start feeding into each other, it gets out of control and gets that kind of loud squelching feedback. And it won't take long to figure out that that's what it is. Next to the microphone is an up arrow. And if you click on that up arrow, that has the different settings for your audio. So depending on what your computer is set up with, you may have multiple microphones. Usually this happens if you're, say, on a laptop and you plug in headphones, then your microphone is going to try to choose between the internal microphone that's built into your laptop or the microphone that's attached to your headphone, assuming your headphones have a microphone attached. Same thing with speakers. So if you're having trouble, or if you're trying to help a student or a fellow teacher troubleshoot their system, this is one of the very first places to go, is click the up arrow next to the microphone and make sure that they have the microphone and speaker set to the correct settings. You notice that down in that menu, if you're following along, near the bottom, there's a thing that says test speaker and microphone. That will allow you to play a sound so that you can test your speakers, and then it will record you with your microphone, and it'll attempt to adjust your volume for recording so that other people can hear you. There are some other things in there. There's actually a setting for audio settings, which gets into some more advanced things. But generally speaking, if you've got your microphone and your speakers hooked up and they're working, you're golden. The next icon is the video icon. It works just like the microphone. If you have a line through it, that means that you're not showing video. If it looks like a white camera, then you are showing video. Generally speaking, you also see yourself on the screen. Now, as a participant, you may not necessarily see yourself on the screen because the system will change around based on who was talking last or which system it picked up sound from. So just kind of a word about that. It also has an up arrow. So if I click an up arrow next to it, then again, I can choose between multiple cameras. So if you have multiple camera devices attached to your system, then you may be able to switch between them. An example of this is if you have a laptop that has a built-in camera, but you've got a webcam in addition, then you may actually see two cameras in this list. Okay. There's a video settings option in there, just like there was with audio. And then depending on how, what type of device you're using and the, frankly, the processing power of the device you're using and the version of Zoom. So several things have to fall in place. You should or could also have an option there to choose a virtual background. I, believe it or not, am not sitting in front of Wrigley Field. All right. I'm at my house, but I have a virtual background of a picture that I took when I went on vacation to Wrigley Field. So, well, I went to Chicago. I didn't specifically go there. Anyway, so if you choose virtual background, then when it first comes up, you may be prompted. And here, I think I could actually share this. Okay. So can you see like my settings here? Do you see that? So here, when you first go to virtual background, you may be prompted to install some software. So if you are, that's fine, just install the software. You may also get a warning that says either your system can't run virtual backgrounds or your processor does not meet minimum specs or something like that. And it'll say something like performance may be degraded. What that means is that if you're using a virtual background, then you may see more stuttering and maybe some more skips as you are showing your video. You could still play with it and see, how it comes out. So I wouldn't let that stop you. Once you install it, there are certain backgrounds that actually come with the system. So you have the Golden Gate Bridge and some grass and the earth, but you can also do video. So like you have the Northern Lights here. And so they're actually moving. Or you could put yourself on the beach, which, about this time, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Likewise, you can install your own, so just a picture off of your computer. You can also do a Google search for free motion Zoom backgrounds, and you can find backgrounds. I just did a Google search and I found one and put it in. So you can find motion backgrounds that you'd like to use. By the same token, if you have your own little video clips that you want to use, then you can do that as well. The Zoom virtual background system will take MP4 files, which are standard video format, and also MOV, which is generally what you get from like an iPhone. All right. So, and then you can also do goofy stuff like the confused Travolta, which is how most people generally see me, is confused. All right. So that is virtual background. Again, you can play with that as you so choose. And I'm going to stop my share for a minute to get back here. And again, that is under the video settings for Zoom. Then continuing along the bottom, there is an invite icon. And I can't remember if you as participants have the invite icon or not. But as a host, then you can do invite, and that allows you to invite people directly from within the Zoom you're already running. So if you're running one and you realize, oh my gosh, I forgot to send the invitation to so-and-so, then you can click invite, and Kelly's having a big time. And you can send that to your email. No, you can email them that rather. There's another thing that on your screen, I believe it just says participants next to next to where I have an invite. You have participants. As the host, I can manage participants. And so when you are hosting, you can also manage participants. So one of the things that has been of concern as of late regarding Zoom is this Zoom bombing thing where people are just jumping in and they're showing inappropriate stuff and they're saying inappropriate stuff. You have control over that. When you first came into this meeting, I had to admit you in. So I can see in the list who is allowed in and who's not. So if you're doing this for a particular set of students and you know those students, then if you see some other person's name that you don't recognize, you can just not admit them, or heck, you could even block them if you want to, remove them completely. Okay. So that's one of the things you can do under the manage participants icon. The other thing you can do under manage participants, I can, as I said before, I can mute everyone. You can also, there's a button for unmute, but when you click unmute, then everyone on the receiving end will get a pop-up message that says the host is asking to unmute your microphone. Is this okay? And then they have to click yes or no. So you can't just arbitrarily unmute everybody's microphone. They have to give you permission to do that. Again, that's a security thing. So you want to, you can check out for that. The other thing you can do in the participants list is you can point to a particular participant, and if for some reason somebody did still manage to get in that you didn't want, you could actually kick them from the Zoom session itself. All right. So, and in addition to some other options, um, I'm not sure. I can't think honestly of any situation where you'd ever want to do this with a student, but there are different things you can do. So if you wanted to make a particular person a co-host where they can pretty much, help run things, then you could make a co-host. You can also give the right to record the Zoom to someone else. So by default, all my Zooms are recorded. Right now, if you tried to hit the record button down at the bottom, then it would pop up and say, you must ask the host for permission. Then I can give you that permission through that manage icon, through that manage participants icon. You can also put people in a waiting room or kind of put them on hold. So if you've got someone who's being unruly, or if you need to have a one-to-one conversation with somebody, you can put them on hold and then just deal with that outside of the rest of the classroom. That's under manage participants at the bottom. There's also an option for polls. So you can create an instant poll where whenever you click on that and bring it up, you can ask for, either different feedback, or you can ask maybe a quiz question, something along those lines. It's kind of like a very, very simplistic Google form. And it is a poll, so it only has multiple choice. But you can have that pop up, and you can actually create those ahead of time and then bring them in as you want to. Like, you don't have to create them on the fly while you're in a meeting. That's honestly, it's kind of a pain to try to do, but you can have polls. Then next to that, you have your share screen. And when I create a meeting, I have it set up so that the other folks cannot share their screen without my permission, right? So that's another way to stop the whole Zoom bombing thing, is to not let people share their screens. That way they can't just arbitrarily take over the session and show pictures on the screen. Now, you may want to allow students to share their screen if you are having them create content that you need to see or you want them to share, right? So at the very base level, if you're doing a, kind of a very casual, hey kids, how's it going? Let's do some show and tell, what are some of the things you're doing? And you want them to be able to show, they could show it on the camera, or if it's something they created, maybe they, I don't know, made something in paint or something, then you could have them share their screen if you want them to. Okay. When you share the screen though, and again, I won't be able to show you this, but I can show you the effects of what I'm about to do. When you click share screen, you get multiple options. The first thing is to share your whole desktop. And you may or may not want to do that. It depends on what else you have going on, on your desktop, in terms of, like, you might have email up and running, you might have whatever. So sharing your desktop shares everything your computer is doing. So if I were to do that now and I share my screen, then everything I do on my screen other than Zoom itself is going to show up on the screen. So if I switch over to, I don't know, just for the sake of argument, if I pull up YouTube, then there's YouTube. All right. And you see everything that I am doing on my screen. Another thing you can do is, let's say that you just wanted to share a PowerPoint, right? And so you had PowerPoint up and running. Then when you hit share screen, then you could actually choose just PowerPoint. And when you close PowerPoint, it's closed, and so therefore it's not sharing anymore, and it will stop the share, and it'll come back to you, right? So you can share your whole desktop, or you can just share one application. Just be careful if you share one application. Just remember that if you close that application, you're not sharing anymore. So just kind of want to be careful with that. Another option when you share your screen is, I'm going to skip that one for just a minute. Interesting. Oh, I must have disabled it. Yeah, well, normally there's a whiteboard and there is annotation, and I don't have that on. So like I said, I must have turned that off when I was in a different Zoom 101 session that I forgot to put back on. And it won't let me do that on the fly. That's a bummer. Shoot. All right, so I'll just describe them then, since that's not working. One of the other options you have is annotation, which allows you to use your mouse to write on the screen. So let's say you had a PowerPoint up and going, and you wanted to annotate it, then you could use your mouse to make circles on the screen, or to point out something in particular, something along those lines. Likewise, there's also a whiteboard option, and that is just what that is. It's a blank white screen, and again, you can write on it. One of the things that you can do is you can give access to annotations or whiteboard, so that if you wanted all of your students to be able to write on that virtual whiteboard at the same time, they could. Again, use that with a grain of salt, because they have access to type whatever they want to type. Now, who's typing what. You can see it there, but just to be on the safe side. Okay. And let me double check the chat real quick. Yeah, as far as sharing my screen to see the options, some of the options I can't show you because Zoom doesn't like to share its own screen. I don't know where. I don't know. Somebody said something about a motion video, a live video. Oh, okay. So the question about, like, some of you just have a black screen with your name. That is, if you click on the stop video, then it'll just have a black screen with your name, unless you put a profile picture like I have done into Zoom. So if you go to your Zoom account online, which we'll go to in just a minute, you can actually upload a profile picture and put your profile picture in there. And that's how you get people's names. That just means that they have turned off their video camera. Okay. One of the other cool things that you can do in Zoom is, when you share your screen, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, and your iPhone and iPad is on the same network as your Zoom session, then you can share your iPhone. No. Oh, pardon me. My phone decided it did not want to be on my Wi-Fi. There we go. Let's try that again. And so now I can share my iPhone or iPad directly with the student. So if there's a particular app you're demonstrating or what have you, you can do that with your iPhone. Again, the big thing is to make sure that your iPhone or iPad is on the same network as your computer. So for a lot of folks at home, if you're already using a laptop on your home Wi-Fi, you just make sure that your iPhone, iPad is connected to the same Wi-Fi, you're covered. If you're using, say, a desktop at home and it's wired into your network, and your Wi-Fi, your iPhone is on that same network through, say, your cable modem or DSL, it should be fine, because they should be on that same network, and then you can share that on your computer screen. Got the hiccups, of course. Let me look real quick. Yeah, that pretty much covers screen sharing. Then next to screen sharing, we have chat, and that allows you to open or close the chat box. when you're setting up a meeting, and again, we'll look at this in a second, but when you're setting up a meeting, you can have it set up to where your participants, i.e. students, are allowed to chat with everyone. And that's how I have mine set up here, where if somebody chats, it goes to everybody. You can also set up one-to-one private chat. I wholeheartedly recommend not doing that, because what that means is that means two people can send private messages to each other, and at least at this stage, you have no idea what's happening, right? You would never see those messages. Now, I will show you a setting where it saves all of the chats, even the so-called private chat, so you do see what was going on. But life's just easier if you just don't let people do one-to-one chatting. Just avoid that anyhow. All right. The next icon over is the record icon. If you are not recording, then it'll be a circle that says record. If you are recording, then that icon will be a series of two icons. There'll be a pause button and a stop button. So you can pause the recording, you could stop the recording. When you're recording a session, you should, in the upper left-hand corner, you should be able to see the word recording with a little blinking red kind of an eye letting you know that it's recording. And I think as a participant, you can also see that I'm recording, right? Does it say recording somewhere on your screen? Some say yes, some say no. Okay, so so some people see it, some don't. I don't know. There you go. Thanks. Up in the corner. All right. So so just to let you know that if you want to record your sessions, then you can record those. You can also have it automatically record when you set up a meeting, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And that's what I do. Every meeting I start, I go ahead and record it, even if I don't need it, want it. Even if I delete it later, I go ahead and record it initially, just in case something weird happens and I need to have that, just to kind of cover myself, frankly, is what it amounts to. Then there's another icon as a host that says breakout rooms, and that allows you to actually take participants and put them into separate small groups. So, and the small groups do not see each other, right? They are virtual small groups. And so you can do that if you want students to work in small groups. Again, you have to kind of be careful of that, just because once they're in small groups, then you have to bounce between those small groups, in terms of keeping up with what's going on. So if something is said or done in a small group, you wouldn't necessarily have been witness to it. So again, depending on your age group and what you're trying to accomplish, but it's a feature. It's a thing you can do. Then then the next icon over is reactions, and Zoom comes with two reactions. You can clap your hands, and when you click on a reaction and say clap your hand, then it shows up in the upper left corner, or at least as I'm looking at it, shows up in the upper left corner. So I can do a hand clap, I can do a thumbs up. And so as you are doing that, I can see everybody's showing up in my gallery view here. Which that reminds me, one of the things I always forget to talk about is if you're on a computer, over in the upper right hand corner, at least it is on my screen, I have an icon that says speaker view, but you can also click on, there's a gallery view where it just shows, generally it's the last person who talked, and then you can scroll through at the top the different folks who are in the session. So you can switch between speaker view and gallery view. Okay. All right. Any questions about any of those settings at this point? I'll just give a second. All right. Sounds like everybody's good to go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my desktop so that now you are looking at, hang on, let me do this. Okay. So now you're looking at my actual Zoom account for let me back up. You're looking at my settings for my own Zoom account. So the way this works is you go to zoom.us and sign in. Ideally, you'll sign in with your school email address. By the way, the default setting for Zoom meetings for the free version is 40 minutes. But if you sign in with your school account, and I will, after this is done later today, I'll send you an email with different links in it. And one of the links is to extend the time. But if you sign in with your school email account, Zoom is giving free unlimited sessions to teachers to help them do their virtual classroom. So you're not limited to the 40 minutes, which is awesome. Um, so when you're in your zoom.us account, again, under profile, this is where you can upload and set your profile picture so that when you turn your camera off, then that's what people see, or you can delete it, not have a picture, and it'll just have name. That's perfectly fine. There's some other information in here if you want to set your time zone and date and time format, all that kind of stuff. Where you're going to spend most of your time on zoom.us, however, is in meetings and settings. I don't know how much time you spend in settings. Generally, once you set them, you're kind of done, but still. So when you're in meetings, it will show you your currently scheduled meetings. Right now, I have one scheduled for 10 o'clock, Zoom 101. That's the one we are in right now. Part of the reason why I know I'm in it is because my little dot is green, letting me know that that's a currently active Zoom. Um, as weird as it is, I could join my Zoom even though I'm already in it. I could also end the Zoom from here rather than from within Zoom itself. I have no idea why you'd want to do that, but it's there. So what you would want to do to schedule a meeting is schedule a new meeting. And then here is where you would give it a name. So depending on how you plan to roll out some of your Zoom sessions, and it can be different from meeting to meeting. If you have, let's say you're going to have a weekly meeting with, I don't know, third graders, then you can say, you could call it the weekly third grader. Oh, well, if I could spell 52 typing classes later, and this is where I'm sitting. All right, so I have weekly third graders. When is the first meeting? And again, it doesn't have to be weekly. If this was a one-off thing, it's just when is it? So I could pick the date and I could say, you know what, we're going to do this Thursdays at 1 p.m. Now you'll notice that when I choose the time just shows the hour and half hour. So if I pick 1 o'clock, I have to go over here and make sure that I change it to PM unless I'm meeting with students at 1 o'clock in the morning. All right, so you want to watch that for sure. How long is the meeting? Generally speaking, you can just leave this at the default 1 hour. Even though it says an hour, it doesn't actually cut you off at an hour. You just keep going if you're the host. All right, but this gives folks an idea who, when you send the invitation out, it gives them an idea about how long to be in there. So let's say it's a 90-minute session, then you could do an hour and a half. What time zone you want to set it up for? Is this a recurring meeting? If it's a one-off, you just skip this and keep right on rolling. However, if I'm doing a weekly third graders meeting, then I would want to do recurring, okay? And I would want it to repeat, I'd want to have it weekly. And I'd say every week on Thursday. You notice it was already checked because I had set my meeting up on a Thursday, all right? But if you were going to have a weekly meeting that happened every Tuesdays and Thursdays, then every Tuesdays and Thursday until whatever end date that I was going to pick. So if I wanted to do it till May 21st, I could do that, or I could pick whatever date, whatever other date I wanted in here. Just for the sake of argument, let's say the 28th. And so this will set this up as a weekly recurring meeting, Tuesdays and Thursdays until May 28th. Okay. Or again, if it's just a one-off, then I can just call it third graders. It's a one-off. We call it good. Registration. If you check this required button, that means that the people who join the meeting have to have a Zoom account. Now, according to Zoom legal team, anyone under the age of 18 should not have an actual Zoom account. Okay. So for the most part, you're not going to have them register. Okay. So I would generally leave that unchecked. The next thing is your meeting ID. Every time or every account is assigned a personal meeting ID. I would not use this because once it's out there, then anyone can attempt to join a meeting with your personal ID at pretty much at any time. I would have it automatically generate a new ID for each meeting. Just again, safety, security, keeping people out. Another thing you can do to keep people out, make sure that you require a password. So I can check this box and I can require a password, and Zoom automatically generated one. I could put one in if I want to. So after I create this and and I show you the invitation will have the password in there. What I would recommend is, doing it as two separate things. You send one that says, "Hey, here's the meeting," and you send a different one that says, "Hey, here's the password," or however you want to handle that. But um, likewise, you could send the meeting out with a password because we are going to do the waiting room, so that's fine. All right. So again, that's the password. Then video, host and participant. When you set these two off, then that means as people join, the video is off. Now they can turn it back on, but it's off by default. Okay. Same thing with, I thought there was an audio thing. There's a mute down here. So video off when they start. If you want your video on as the host, then you can have that on when you come in. I leave it off just because when you connect, you may not necessarily be exactly where you want to be as you're getting in, and or, you know, we're all doing this from home now. So when, who knows what's going on in the background until you can kind of get things settled down and get the meeting started. So I usually just leave my video off. Audio, uh, both means that people can join either by calling a telephone number and using their phone, or they can use the computer audio like we're doing here with our microphones and headsets. Um, when you create a session, then Zoom generates a phone number that can be used for your session for the folks that can't come in on a computer. Maybe they're out and about. Well, they shouldn't be out and about really, but anyway, if they're not near the computer, they could join their phone, right? So many weird things you got to think about now. Um, so there are some other options here. One of them is enable join before the host. And if that is checked, that means that people can get into the session before you as the host have started the session. I don't recommend checking this. Now, the other thing is if you have the waiting room enabled, that kind of cuts down on, again, some of the Zoom bombing or things that happen before you get there. But uncheck that enable join, and that way people have to wait until you start it before they can join in, much like what happened with today's session. Mute participants upon entry, and this is what I was talking about before with the microphones. So I have that checked so that when I start a Zoom session, when people connect, it automatically mutes them. Again, they have the right to overwrite that so they can unmute themselves once they're in. So just kind of be aware of that. Then the enable waiting room, this is what I've talked about several times during this, and that is where people have to wait to be admitted before they can come into the meeting. And as a matter of fact, as I've been talking and sharing, I get a little pop-up as the host that comes down from the top of the screen, and it'll say, so-and-so wants to join. Do you want to admit them or not? And then it's very easy for me to, while I'm doing this, jump up there, click admit or click deny, and, keep on rolling. So. But you definitely want to enable the waiting room as a security precaution. Only authenticated users can join. This goes back to that thing up here where registration is required. Authenticated users have to have a Zoom account. You don't want that for your students, especially because, frankly, it's against Zoom's policy, but it also complicates things. Things are already complicated enough with different things happening in Zoom. I wouldn't mess with authenticated users. You can do a breakout room pre-assign, which basically means that as people come in, they are automatically assigned to breakout rooms. I don't recommend that, mainly because I like to have way more control over who's going into which rooms, and or you may not know how you want the breakout rooms to look until you get the students in there and you're having a discussion about something. It's okay, you guys are going to talk about that over here, and you guys are going to talk about this over here, right? So I wouldn't do a pre-assign. And then the almost last option here is to record the meeting automatically. Again, I have that checked. And then you have options on the local computer. If you have the pro version, that is, if your district pays for Zoom, then you can also record in the cloud. For the most part, you're just going to have the on local computer as the option. And that just means that as soon as you get into the Zoom, it starts to record it on your computer. And as soon as you end the meeting, then it pops up and it does a little conversion and then saves that video of the meeting onto your computer. And I will tell you, they do not take a whole lot of space, even though like these hour-long meetings, if I were doing an hour-long YouTube video, it would be huge amount of storage on my computer. The Zoom recordings are very compressed, and so they don't take up a whole lot of room, even for an hour recording. I'm actually very impressed with that. And then you can have alternate hosts. So, for example, if you wanted a co-host, if you're going to team teach, or if you just wanted another person, another adult to be able to help manage things, then you could add that in as an alternate host. Okay. Any questions about settings for a specific meeting?
I have a question. This is Alice Baird.
Yep.
I have seen Zoom. I've been participating in Zoom. I've never hosted one.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the people that have hosted my Zoom meetings have managed to change the background to look like their PowerPoint when you enter the meeting. How is that possible?
They could be doing that in a couple of different ways. One way could very well be that they just took the first slide of their PowerPoint, and saved it off and made it a virtual background, just like you would any other picture. There are other settings. If you've got additional software, and I don't know if in Zoom you can just do it natively. I don't think so, but there is other software that you can use that will allow you to pull in multiple sources and use those in different ways. So, for example, just to throw this out there, there's a piece of software called OBS, and it's free, and it is a broadcasting software, and it would allow you to have like your camera in one section of the screen and say the live PowerPoint behind you. And then you can take that entire feed and feed that out as your Zoom feed. It gets a little complicated, but so that's definitely a way to do that. So
I'm thinking they probably just used their first slide as a virtual background. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you get all of the settings here, then I can hit save. And at that point, that is when the meeting itself is now created, right? So you notice it has a password that's required. Here's the invitation for invitees. So this is what I could copy and paste into an email if I wanted to do it that way. Likewise, there's a copy the invitation option over here on the right. If I click that, here is an actual whole email. And you'll notice that here's the Zoom meeting. Now, this email invitation has the password in there. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Just if, for whatever reason, whoever you're sending this to, let's say you're sending this to parents, if they then forward this out to somebody else, that whoever is out there is going to have access because they'll know the password. Again, though, you're using the waiting room, so you can use that to kind of help mitigate some of that. But I could then copy the meeting invitation. Once it's copied to my clipboard, then I can jump over to my email. I have no idea who I'm signed in as, probably me personally. Yeah, doesn't matter. Then I could, come on. No, it's being slow. Anyway, I could compose, there we go. Now that I got 52. I can compose this. I could put in whoever's email addresses I wanted to. Then I could right click and paste that Zoom meeting invitation into the email and send that off to the recipients. Okay. The advantage you have to sending it this way is that there's no limit to the number of people that you can put here. Using the, there's actually a way to, oh, I know, using the invite from within Zoom, there's like a limit to the number of people that you can invite, and that's caused a lot of confusion. I wouldn't mess with that. I would copy the invitation, paste it into an email, and send it to the people that you need to send it to. Okay. So if I go back to my meetings tab over on the left, you'll see that now I have my third graders Zoom session scheduled for 1 o'clock on Thursday. Here's the meeting ID, and I could start it, I could delete it. And again, I can schedule all kinds of meetings. You don't have to schedule. You could actually just go into Zoom and start one up. And then if you wanted to at that point, invite, a small group of people in. It's just up to you whether you want to schedule them ahead of time or if you're just going to do it a quick meeting where you just immediately start Zoom and invite people in. One thing I did want to show real quick on the meetings tab, if you're on again a PC, a Mac, I think possibly also a Chromebook, you'll have a couple of options down here. One, there's an Outlook plugin. So if you use Microsoft Outlook as your mail client, there is a plugin for that. There's also one that is a Chrome extension. And what that lets you do is that actually lets you schedule Zoom meetings from within Google Calendar. So that if I were in Calendar, then and if I wanted to create an event, right? So I just click on a day, click, then down in the corner here, there would be an option to create a Zoom meeting. All right. I don't have that option because I don't have it installed. And the reason why I don't have it installed is because once you install it, then the option disappears and then I can't show you because it wouldn't be here. So, but you can download the Chrome extension if you're interested in that. And then the last thing we're going to talk about are the overall settings. So when you're at zoom.us, there you have settings for individual meetings, but then you also have the overall settings. And the advantage to setting some of this stuff up in the overall settings is that when you then go create a meeting, some of this stuff is already checked for you and you don't have to mess with it anymore, right? Set it and forget it. Different things. Host video, is the host video on or off, or participant video on or off at the start? Remember, you can always turn your camera on. The participants can always turn their camera on, that type of thing. Again, audio type, how do you want people to be able to listen to it? Can they join before the host? Use your personal ID when scheduling. I would leave that off. Only authenticated users can join. Remember, that's that whole, they have to have a Zoom account. Leave that off. Only authenticated users can join from a web client. I can actually turn that off because I'm already not having authenticated users join meetings, so that doesn't matter. Require a password. So if you don't want to have to check that box every time, if you have a tendency to forget to check the box, just turn it on here. And then every time you create a meeting in the future, that box will be checked for you. You can always uncheck that, by the way. If you want to schedule a meeting or set up a meeting and you don't want a password, just uncheck that box when you're creating a meeting and it won't have to have a password. Let me see. Here's the embed password in the meeting link. You'll notice that in my invitation, it had the link to the meeting and it had the password separately. If you want it to where people could just click on the one link, it goes to Zoom with the password built in, then you can turn this on. As a security measure, I would not turn that on, but that's up to you. It's there. Do with it as you wish. Mute participants on entry. I wholeheartedly recommend that. That way folks don't have a bunch of background noise coming in. If you want a meeting reminder, then you can have a meeting reminder that will pop up in your Zoom client. And depending on how you have your Zoom client set up, I think you actually, as long as Zoom is running down in the system tray, I think you also get a pop-up that says, this Zoom starting in 10 minutes or whatever. Here is the chat thing that I was talking about before. You can actually turn off chat if you don't want the students to chat at all. Or what I do is I have the chat turned on, okay? So that means that participants can send a message to all participants, right? So if I send a chat, everybody sees it. Private chat is turned off, no one-on-one chatting, and I wholeheartedly recommend that. The other thing that I do is I auto save chats so that no matter what happens in the chat, even if it's a one-on-one private chat, it will get saved. The problem I have with the one-on-one and the auto saving is that you don't see what happened until after the fact, right? And then it's up to you to also go and review that whole chat to make sure, like if you just turn off one-to-one, then there you go. You avoid the whole thing. There's a sound, whether participants join or leave. I have that off because frankly, I find it annoying. You may have heard it in other sessions where when people come in and out, it plays a doorbell sound. Well, when you get, 20, 30, 50, 100 people in a session, it's just annoying. One of the other things to turn off, at least from my perspective, is file transfer. Now, having said that, what this will let you do is if you turn this on, then in the chat, that means that whoever's in chat could upload a file to the chat group. All right. Of course, the danger is somebody's going to upload something inappropriate. Where it could be beneficial, though, is if you had the students working on something and you wanted them to share it out, that is a way they could share it out. They could share out their PowerPoint or their Word doc, or, if they downloaded their Google Doc as a PDF or whatever, then file transfer is one way to share it. Frankly, I would use Google Classroom or email or frankly anything other than file transfer in Zoom. So I would leave that off, but it's there just in case. There's a display end of meeting experience feedback. So if you want to know if people liked it or didn't like it, you can add that. I don't do that. Polling, again, whether or not you want polls in a particular Zoom to be allowed. And I'm kind of skipping stuff down this. Show Zoom windows during screen share. I have that turned on, but I don't think it still works the way I would like it to work. But ideally, it's supposed to be able to show you the Zoom screens while I'm sharing. But I think even when I do that, it still doesn't show all the stuff. So speaking of screen sharing, do you want to be able to screen share? Yeah, that'd be nice. Who can share? I generally have this as the host only, right? That way I'm the only one as the host who can share my screen. So you could do all participants if you want. Again, the danger with that is that you have no control over who's going to show what. So I woun't do that.
Good.
Uh-huh.
Is that where you would click the all participants button so that we could do the text and the whiteboard? Is that where you? No, that where had it?
Oh, no. See, it's down here. I had turned it off.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, you got to keep me on my toes. All right. So, disable desktop and screen share for users. So you can turn that off so users can't share. Now, I will say this. You could set this to all participants can share and who can start sharing when someone else is sharing if you leave this as host. So if I were to do this, okay, what this means is that anyone could share their screen, but while someone else is sharing, the only other person who could take back over is the host. If you have it all in all, that means everybody can start sharing everything anytime. I mean, it's like the Wild West. All right. So you could do all participants can share, but the host can take back over. And that way students could share their screens if you wanted them to do that. However, here, disable desktop screen share for users. And I have it off. So, right, you have to think like in weird double negative. If I have disable turned off, then that means it actually should be enabled. Right. So I don't know. It's really weird. I don't like when they use a disable word for a feature you turn off and on. But anyway, so the reason I couldn't do annotation before, because I had it turned off, same with whiteboard. But this is where you can turn on and off annotation. And so if it's on, then that means your users can add annotations. Same with whiteboard. If it's on, your users can participate in the whiteboard as well. Now, this is all for future meetings. So even though I just turned it on, it doesn't affect a meeting that's currently in place. Remote control allows other people to take over your computer. I recommend leaving that off. There are reasons for having it on, but for now, we'll just leave that off. Allow removed participants to join. So if you kick someone out, are they allowed to come back? And if you have that off, the answer is no. And if you turn that on, then the answer is yes. Do you want the participants to be able to rename themselves? So you can turn that off if you want to, or you can leave it on. Basically, if you leave it off, then whatever name they joined with is the name that shows up. If you have it on, then really at any time, any of you can change any of your names at this point. That's whatever you want to do. Whether you want breakout rooms, far camera control, this is whether or not somebody can take over your camera. I would leave that off. virtual background. So here's a setting here. If you have virtual background on, that means that in your meeting, that anybody can put up whatever virtual background they want to. Yes, there's a potential issue with that because you have no control over what they put behind them. However, if you turn this off, then they can't. They can't change their virtual background, and it will only show what's going on in the background. So you actually have control over whether or not your students' virtual backgrounds will show up or not. Okay, so you can set that or not set that however you want to. I'm just kind of, again, scrolling through some of this stuff. Here's the waiting room. Do you want the waiting room? I would definitely do the waiting room. And which participants get in the waiting room, all or guests only. I would just leave this as all and call it good. You can also add a title, logo, and a description to the waiting room. So you could actually have, welcome to my Zoom, please wait, you will be admitted soon, whatever. I have no idea what the waiting room even says. I just use whatever came with Zoom. Let's see, I'm looking down real quick. Notify the host when participants join the meeting. If you have it up above where they can join, then you get a notification. But if you have that turned off, this does nothing. I'm just kind of, again, scrolling down. Really, that's about it. Any questions about any of these settings? I mean, there's a bunch in there, but I just wanted to kind of cover those real quick. And I'll stop the share. All right. So any other questions about Zoom in general? Oh, I did want to share one quick thing. I don't have a picture of it. Some of you may have seen it, especially if you've been in the AMI group for a while. But there's a picture going around, and at this point, many people have come up with many solutions of using your phone. That is wild. My phone does not show up. Every now and then. All right. Anyway, where you can use your phone as a document camera in your Zoom. And the way that works is you would set up the Zoom as you as the host, say on your laptop or computer, whatever you normally do. Then you would also join the Zoom. I'm getting a call as we speak. You would join the Zoom from your device as another participant and switch the camera on that device. And then you could get, I don't know, whatever, a stack of toilet paper or Kleenex boxes, or if you can build something, have a kid build something out of Legos or something, but you could build a stand for it and have it pointing down, and then you could put your documents under that camera, and then basically you switch between those two cameras in your Zoom session. And that way you have a document camera that's part of your Zoom. And I'll show, if I'm not mistaken, or I'll make sure that one of the links that I send out later with the email, it'll have samples, so and kind of some instructions with that, so you can get a feel for how that works. But it's a cool, easy way to add a document camera to your Zoom. Any questions about any of the stuff we covered, or all of the stuff we covered? Going once, going twice. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Hope you learned how to do some stuff in Zoom. What I would recommend doing is if you get, I'm going to use this very cautiously, but if you get some free time to play with Zoom itself, then like after this meeting is over, you can just open up the Zoom program and just start a meeting, even if no one else is in it. Go ahead and start a meeting, and then you can play around with some of the stuff that we were just looking at, especially some of the stuff that I couldn't show you. Or what I've heard from a lot of folks is that they are kind of doing a one-on-one where you connect with one person and you're the host for a while and then disconnect, and then they are the host and you join. So that way you guys can learn off each other and play around with Zoom. So awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of the day.